Okay, we are in this point, okay? I hope, who is the result of this rank capit test? Do you see? Okay, everything is fine. You must see 2 skipped tests and around 94 pass. Okay, it's okay. This means the OpenCAFE locally deployed is working properly. We check all the service APIs implemented with the test cases present on the documentation. Okay. Okay. We can now move to the next one. Okay. This is the pass. If you run the smoke test, only 22 tests were passed. This is in order to reduce the time spent in running the test. And now we are ready to start, okay? This is the heavy point in the presentation, okay? The setup of Postman, okay? Pelayo will show you how to set up the Postman.
I try. Okay. So, I don't know. Okay, well, to set up the Postman, the first step is go to the Firefox, and well, if you go to the homepage, you will see here the tab of the documentation. Okay. What we are going to do is basically all of this. Create a provider, publish an API, create an invoker, and consume that published API. It's all explained in here, but well, we are see all the requests. Okay, so the first step is download this folder, the Postman test zip. Okay. And when do you have download the Postman test zip, you can extract the folder. So here in Dowlands we have already and here we have all the files that we need to run the Postman collection. So the next step will be running a Node script that will help us to make some operations that we can do in Postman. For example, create the CCRs, some tricks that we need to make for the certificates of the CAPIF. So we can open a new console and well, in downloads the Postman test. We can download the dependencies of Node. So we can put npm space I, and we download all the dependencies, and now we can run the Node script. Okay. If all is working fine, you will see these 2 lines, listener API running, and a location of the data. You will see it. I think yes, okay. So the next step is use Postman. You can open Postman. So, well, the next step is import the collections. So you can click in import, select files, and in Downloads, Postman test, we can see the Capif Postman collection, okay, and the Capif environments, .postman environment. This. Okay. We select both and open. Now, here we can click in import, and in the collection tab, we will see the Capif request, and in environments, the environments that we will use in this presentation. So, all of you have imported? Yeah, okay. So, the last step is run the API that we are going to publish, okay? If you go to the terminal, we can create another tab, and we need to put these commands, okay? To activate a virtual environment, download the necessary requirements, and running the API. So, this command to enter in the virtual environment, and this to install all the requirements. Okay. With all installed, we can just run the Hello API that we are going to publish in Capif. Okay. All of you have the API running. Do you have any problem? Okay. Now with this, we finish the setup of Postman. So now we enter in the flow of Postman. Now what we are going to do is the register as admin of an user. As Jorge said before, we have another service outside of the scope of Capif that manages these users. So now, as an admin, we are going to create a user. The first step is logging us as an administrator. When you deploy Capif, by default, you have the credentials of one admin. The credentials are here in the Capif environment, and here, the admin user and admin password. The default credentials are admin and password 123. So, if we move to login admin, okay, this is the flow that we are going to do. If we go to this request, we can use the register. We can make a request to the register service, to the login endpoint, and using the basic out and the credentials of the administrator, we can get the tokens that are necessary to create, delete, or modify the users. So, first of all, we should select the Capif environments. Okay. And as you can see, here we have the register hostname, in this case localhost. We have the register in localhost and port 8084, the basic auth with admin credentials, admin and password 123. If we made the request, we'll receive 2 tokens. The access token that is necessary to create, update and remove the users, and the refresh token to obtain another access token, because the access token expires in 10 minutes.
Yeah,
So,
one question. What's the purpose of the Hello API client?
is the API that we are going to publish. So the last step, in the last step, as Invoker, we are going to consume that API and see that we are consuming the Hello API. Only make this.
Okay.
The Hello API that we have here is only to see, well, as an invoker, okay, later as an invoker, we are going to consume this API. And we will see here that we consume the API. It's only for that. This API must validate the token that we are going to use and return us, in this case, a message of...
So is it an echo service? It's an API, so does it require authentication, or does it require, you just do a get command and receive something, or what is?
It's not required. It's the API that you publish in Capif. It's an example.
Okay.
The API that is necessary is the other one.
So there's no need to somewhere to communicate the data model of this API. Is there a need? This API, does it have a specific data model behind that?
What? Sorry, I don't...
This API, does it use if it's a REST API, assuming you do just a get request and receive something, do we need to post something? I mean, what kind of API is this?
Yeah, it's a simple REST API that, well, later we'll
which
see.
verb of REST does it implement?
Only it's a get endpoint that returns us a message.
Okay.
Only do that.
Okay.
So it's an example where we verify the token that we get of OpenCapif and return us an example, a message. Okay. I assume that all of you have the access token to create a user. So the next step will be create a new user. If we move to create a user request, in authorization, we will have the auth type BR token with the token that we receive in the previously request. Okay. And in the body, we have some information about the user that we are going to create. The information are the credentials, username and password. In this case will be custom user and user pass.
Sorry, could you make your screen a bit bigger?
Yeah, I think
Maybe one
so.
notch or two notch.
Maybe.
Okay. Yeah, enough. Thanks.
Okay. And other information, the enterprise of the user, country, email, purpose. Some of these parameters are optional, some mandatory. The mandatory are username and password, because the user needs to use these credentials to get later the necessary information to use Capif. So, if we make the request, okay, we will see that the user is registered and we obtain a unique ID that identifies the user. If we want to delete the user, we need to use this unique ID. Okay. The next step will be the get out. Okay, this is the user UUID that we obtain. And well, yeah. Now we can onboarding as a user the provider. Okay. So the next step will be the get out request, because as a user now we need to obtain all the necessary information to use Capif. This information is, as you can see in the presentation, the CR-root certificate to validate the certificates that expose as Capif, the access token that is needed to create the provider, and the necessary URLs to make the request. So, in the get out request to the register service, in the authorization tab, we have the basic auth type and the credentials of the user that we create in the previously request. Custom user and user pass. Okay, so if we made the request, we obtain what I say: the access token, the CR-root certificate, and the URLs. All of you have this information? Yeah? Okay. We also, in this request, if we move to script tab, we see that we save all this information in the environment, and we also use or make a request to the node script that we have running. In this case, this endpoint is to create a file with the CR-root certificate that we receive. This is necessary because later when we will configure Postman, we need to specify this CR certificate, and we only can specify it as a file. So, well, it's a trick that we are doing in Postman, only to know. Okay. If all of you have the token, now we can onboard the provider. Okay. To onboard the provider, we need to do some steps before. The first is use as a bearer token, an authorization type bearer token, the access token that we receive from the GitHub endpoint. And in body, we need to specify some CShares. A CShare, if you don't know what it is a certificate signing request that Capif used to expose the certificates. So, if we move to the scripts, the press request script, we have another request to the node script. In this case, the script will generate a CCR and a key pair of, well, two keys, the public key and private key. Okay, I think it all. Okay, we need to create one CCR and one key pair per each provider function. The provider is composed by three functions: the AEF, API exposing function, that expose the API, the APF, API publish function, that is in charge of publish, deleted the APF, and the AMF, the API manage function, that is in charge of configuring or managing the provider. So we need to create these CCRs, we need to create these key pairs, and in the body we need to specify here in the API provider path key of each provider function its CCR. Okay? The CCR should contain the public key and should be signed by the private key. If don't do this, the captive core function can't expose the certificate. It's important. In our case, the Node script are using OpenSSL to create these CCRs and key pairs. And with this, we don't have any problem. So I recommend use OpenSSL to create these CCRs. Yeah. About more parameters of the provider. Here we can see the regsec, which contains the access token that we obtain from the GetOut endpoint, and well, some information about the provider. Maybe you could have more than one provider, and you can use this parameter to different providers. So if we make the request, okay, we obtain the API provider DOM ID, okay, that identifies the provider. Also, here in headers, we have the location of the created resource that contains the API provider ID. And in body, per each provider function, we obtain an ID and the certificate. In this case, the AEF ID and certificate, the APF. Okay.
Yeah, so could you repeat again what we are creating? Because I've seen that we create a certificate and then we are sending some certificate request. So could you repeat it a bit?
Okay. I read. First, we need to create the CCR. Okay. The CCR contains your public key and is signed with your private key. Then you can put the CCR of its provider function here in the API provide prof path key. Okay, and well, here we have the CCR of the AEF, CCR of the APF, and CCR of the AMF. If we move on to the script pre-request, we modify this JSON here, okay, and we put this CCR in PEM format. Okay. When we made the request, we receive, well, Postman create the certificate, the Capif core function create the certificates and return us the 3 certificates. As a comment, the certificates are different. Maybe you can use the same CCR, but the certificates that Capif expose are different because use the common name, and in the common name we have the ID of each provider function. So we need different certificates because the next request, in the next request we are going to use the mutual TLS. So every request use the certificate, in this case the publish API, will use the APF certificate and APF private key. For example, for other requests like events, okay, the subscription of events use the AMF certificate, and we need to use that certificate. Yes.
Maybe I can say something here about the provider. The provider defines 3 different roles. Okay, this is the point here. Mm-hmm. Then each role is at the 3GPP specification is in charge of do some operations. Okay, for example, the events is the AMF. Sorry. To publish, you need to use the APF. And the other one is the AEF in order to manage the API exposure. Mm-hmm. Okay? This is the key point of this.
Mm-hmm.
What it does is encrypts the information that you request with the public key. That's why you need your private key.
No. At this point, the onboarding, we are performing the onboarding of the provider. When provider wants to interact with the Capif core function, it should use the role that manage it. Okay, this is defined on the 3GPP, the Capif specification. It has 3 roles. Okay, the management role, the publish role, and the exposure role. And this is the point. If you want to act as manager, you need to set up this certificate in the request. Okay, sorry.
No. Okay. So, if all of you could create a provider, the next step is configure the certificate in Postman. As Jorge said, we need to use the specific certificate per each request. So, now to configure the certificates, we can go to settings in Postman. The certificates path tab, and enable the CA certificates. You will see this window, and you can select here in the folder that we export that we have a response folder. There we have the CACert certificate that we create in the get-out post script, and we need to use that certificate here for the CA certificate. Okay. If you have this, the next step is add the certificate for Capif. In this case, we have as hostname Capif core, and we can select the client cert certificate and the client key certificate. Okay?
In the previous screen, where the host, the Capif core, is it no ending suffix after that? Because here you generate a client certificate. What is the host here? Is it the host, the local host?
It's localhost.
Okay.
This is we have here a little trick because we set up the etc hosts with those names. Yeah.
Yes. I think you should somehow say it. The host of the virtual, which host? You mean the virtual machine host? In the etc host has alias which says Capif store. Is this one?
Yes, this is the point.
Okay.
This is because we don't.
No, it's
want-
okay. It's okay. But it was a whole logic. Okay.
It's very good catch here because you can see there. You see the local host. Very good.
Okay. And if we have this, we should see these windows. The CACert certificate, host Capif core, CRT certificate file client cert, and key file client key. Okay. So our next step will be publish the API. To publish the API, first we need to use the API certificate. So if you go to the script pre-request, we can see that using the Node-Script API, we make a request sending the APF certificate and APF key that we have in the environment. What the Node-Script make in this request is rewrite the content of the client certificate and client key. Why we made this? In Postman, you cannot have 3 different certificates for the same host. If you try to get here, settings, certificates, and add another certificate for Capif core, for example, as you can see, remake the host that we had here and don't make anything. So the trick here is use the Node script to rewrite this certificate. Okay, so I say core, Capif core, and the certificate client cert and client key that will be rewriting in every request. Okay, so in this case we have the mutual TLS with the APF certificate and key, and in the body we have the information about the API that we want to publish. These information are the API name, okay, that must be unique. If in Capif we have another API called Hello API Demo, we won't publish the API, we couldn't publish the API. The AEF profiles that expose the API, in this case we only have one AEF, so here we only have one profile. In the profile, we have the AEF ID of the AEF that exposes the API, and a list of the API versions that contains the resources of the API. In this case, we only have an endpoint, hello, the information about the endpoint, the name, the type of endpoint. In this case is request response, not subscribe notify. The operation that support, post, and a short description about the endpoint. We also have the protocol that supports this API, HTTP1. The format of the data, if it needs a body, in this case JSON. The security method that support, we only support in release 1 OAuth, so we only have OAuth. And the interface description to make the request. In this case, API or hostname, the port, and the security method that support that interface description. What? Yeah, because the API is...
Because it's the same, or because you have a different name on the... you have a virtual environment created where the API lives in there,
yeah,
but the name of that machine is, because you created the certificate, it's not local host, it's the Capif host.
Okay.
Just the issue here is, this is where are the service exposed. In this case, it's locally, is local deployed. You can set up here the IP address, or the service domain is the other.
Yes, another.
Yes, you have two ways to define where are the service API deployed. In this case, we are using the local address, because we have in locally deployed with Python a server to receive that request. This is the point. And in the specification, you can see interface description, and also, I don't know, the other name is server name. You can define the complete URL. You have two ways.
Yeah. Here we have the API in localhost and port 8088. Localhost 8088. Well, some description of the API and the API status that show where the API is available with a list of AEFs where it's available. In this case, we only have an AEF, so here we have. And if we send the request, we can see that Capif returns the same description, but with the API ID. This ID is also in the location header. Okay. Our current status.
One question. At this point, can we use encryption when setting the protocol? So when you set the protocol, you set HTTP, like basic HTTP. Can we use, for example, HTTPS?
In the body?
In the body, I think, yes.
Here.
Mm-hmm.
This is an enumeration of 3GPP. And yes, you can use HTTP2. So
okay.
You use HTTPS.
But in order to use the HTTPS, you can set up the port if you use the interface description, or with the server name, I need to read, you can set up the HTTPS // okay?
Another question? So in this example, guys, in the request message, you specify the API specification, which in this case includes only a post request to some URI, without a body, right? So if you go a little bit up, where's the post? You have the API specification, and you're saying that this service API supports only a post request. Yes, so in this post you don't expect a body. You just send a post request to hello endpoint.
Yes, in the current definition of the 3GPP for this body, there is no place to share the body that they expect. You define the operation, but the body itself, you need to read the specification of the service.
Oh, okay, so this is, so essentially in the request you don't specify the whole API
No, only the
specification. So you're saying, I support a post in this resource, I support a GET in this report, but you don't have a full specification of the API.
Yes.
So in this case, you assume that the consumer needs to know the API details, the API specification.
This detail, yes.
So if I have to know the API specification, then why do I need this information in the request message anyway?
Yes, because no, this is important because they say where are these API exposed.
So I share the IP address, the ports, and also the
endpoint.
resource name.
Yeah.
But okay, but this is not a full API specification. So still the invoker needs to know the whole API specification.
Need to know that information, yes. The body is not specified in this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would expect the publisher to say, okay, this is my full API specification, and this is how you can use, the service, but apparently this is not, the case.
We discussed about that some time ago, and also I missed this information here in the specification, but there is no way to get into, to put here, okay? Maybe we can talk about that.
Yeah, you don't need to put the whole specification in the body. You can just put a URL that actually points you where the open API specification is.
Maybe it's a good way to work around to put that in the description. Share the URL of the Swagger, for example. Yeah.
I think David, this is a big limitation here. It's a big limitation. I mean, the invoker needs always to know, before it calls the API, it needs to know the API specification, how to use the API. Not very useful.
In the 3GPP meeting we had in Maastricht, I think it was China Unicom or some Chinese operator, brought some proposal on using Kapir during the development cycle, okay? Because they say that, okay, if Kapir is providing the API directory, then the developer needs to be able to discover the APIs, then do the coding, and then use it. The problem is that in order to discover the APIs, you need to be onboarded. So you cannot discover the APIs beforehand, right? So this contribution was pushed back, but I need to double check what is the status now, because, as you said, it makes sense that somehow the developer has access to the Swagger information somehow in order to complete the application.
Okay, well, we can pass to the next part, that is onboard the Invoker and discover the API. So, after the API publication, we can onboard the Invoker to obtain the information to consume that API. To onboard the Invoker, we must use the onboard Invoker request. But first, we need to request another access token because, as I said, has an expiry time of 10 minutes. So we can request another access token, and then we can onboard the Invoker. As authorization type, we have like the provider, the VR token, with the access token that just received. And in the body, we have some information about the Invoker. In this case, the principal attribute is the API Invoker public key. For the Invoker, like the provider, we need to create a CCR and two keys, public key and private key. If we see the script here in the pro request, we make the same request to the node script, and we put here the CCR. So if we send the request,
We put there the CSR, but
yeah, in the script, in the per request, we request the CCR to the node script, and here we modify the body of the request and put there the CCR.
okay.
Maybe you can show the node. The terminal.
In the terminal, if
You can see the request.
yeah. Here we see some logs of the node script. Okay. We generated the CCR, we read the CCR and the key. So as response, we will receive a 201 created with the Invoker ID and the API Invoker certificate that we are going to use to the next request. We are also obtaining headers the location resource. Okay, so the next request will be the discover. We already have all the certificate setting in Postman made. So, well, if you see here, in the next request, we are going to use the Invoker cert and Invoker key as in the provider. And, well, the discover request is only a get to the discover URL that we obtain in the getout endpoint. And if we make the request, we obtain the information of a list of APIs that are published in Capif. In this case, we only have one API, the Hello API 1 demo, and all its information. Okay. Now, we are going to create a security context to use this API. So, if we click the security context, we will see in the body the information about the API that we want to use. In this case, the information is the API ID of the API that we want to use, the AEF that exposes this API, and our preferred security method to use. In this case, as I said, we only support OAuth method. Our preferred security method will be OAuth. If we
One question. So this security context, the invoker should take care of the security context. 'Cause,
Request to Capif the creation of a security context.
but I mean, the provider expose its API. So it says I have an application in this API. So then it communicates with Capif Nginx and is registered. Then the invoker like asks to Capif, which APIs could you offer me? And could you repeat again what this security context is about?
The security context basically said what security method you need to use to consume an API. If you see the response of Capif to when you create the security method, you will see that the selected security method will be OAuth, and with this security context created, the invoker has access to request the token to consume the API. Without this security method, the invoker won't be allowed to use any API.
Okay, so the provider could expose different APIs using different security methods, and that's why the user, I mean the invoker, should request, like should ask which method I need to this specific API.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks.
But it's Capif the one creating the security context?
The invoker requests the creation of the security context.
And is Capif the one that says, okay, this is the...
Yeah, this is the security method that you need to use, and you are allowed to request the token in this case. So, as the selected security method is OAuth, we need to request a token to make the request to the API. And that will be our next part. Okay. Now we have the security method created, and we need the token. So, the step 9, the get token, we request with the query parameters our token. In this case, we specify our ID to make sure that Capif can verify that we have the security context created, and the scope of the token. In this case, in this scope, follow this pattern, 3GPP hashtag the AEF ID that expose the API that we want to use, followed by the API name that we want to use, and the token needs to be valid only for this API name if we pass this scope.
And what about the security context that we previously requested?
So when we make this request, Capif check the security context if we have access to the API, and return us the token if we have access, or nothing if we haven't. The security context is okay. Now we are using OAuth method, but if we have or 3GPP specify another two methods, mutual TLS and PKA. These methods don't need a token to consume the API. So what use is the certificate that expose the API to consume the API. And the provider, the AEF, must request the security context to confirm that the invoker has access to that API. But we only have implemented in release 1 the OAuth method, so it's another side. Okay, with this.
So who defines who has access to an API or not?
What?
Who defines who can have access to an API or not? So I request access to an API. Who says, yes, you can have access or not?
In this case, all APIs are available. Now we have the vendor extensibility that the provider give the invoker some credentials to access to his APIs. I don't know how give the credentials.
So ultimately is the exposure that decides if the invoker can consume the API or not. Okay? But this is not defined in the standard. Okay, so what the standard says is that the invoker requests the security context, we get the OAuth token, we send the API request, including in the token the information about the API provider, and then it's the AEF that needs to analyze this token, check the scope, if the scope is right, and check the invoker ID. But this is what is specified in the standard. There are not rules to decide which API invokers can access the APIs exposed in the AEFs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here if we request the token, we will obtain the token that we need to use to consume the API, the type of the token that expires in 600 seconds, 10 minutes, and the scope. As I said, contains the AEF ID and the API name. So our last step will be consume the API. In this case, we made the request to the local host, is the host name that we obtained from the Discover service, the port 8088, and the URL hello. If you remember, the method was post, and in the authorization type we have BR token, the token that we receive from the previously request, and well, in this case the API needs some body, this body. We only pass a name. So as you can see here, we don't have any log, and if we make the request, we receive a message with hello, custom user, that is the name that we pass. Welcome to Capif. And if we move to the terminal, here we find the request. And with this, we complete the entry flow of the full flow using a local deployment of OpenCapif. So congratulations if you are, well, and thanks for your attention.
Now you are experts on OpenCapif implementation. Maybe we have time to tell something more, or
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Because I was following all the steps, and I understand step by step and all the actions that we were executing. But what I'm thinking now is, okay, imagine that I have software, and I want somehow to expose this software. Maybe this software has a catalog of endpoints, whatever, and I want to expose it through CAPIF, let's say. Is there any kind of library that I can import or consume in order to, let's say, automate all these steps? Because I understand if I have to do it manually, my software needs to create a provider according to some parameters. It needs to have a user. It needs to then go method or endpoint by endpoint publishing. Just want to know if there is this software part, the server part, and also I'm interested on the client part, because maybe I have a second software that wants to consume the OpenCAPIF, and the same, I mean, the symmetric case applies.
Yeah, understood. Okay, this is the extra point. Let's here, okay. Extras. Okay, I will pass this, okay. The new SDK, okay. We are working one colleague is working on SDK, and we want to publish it on January, okay? This SDK, as you can see in the slides, we want to present in January with the release 2 of the OpenCAPIF. As you said, it contains the functions to simplify the way to create or invoker or provider, and also publish the APIs and consume it. This is a good question, and as you said, for a developer, maybe it's complicated to implement from zero an invoker or provider. We want to simplify that, and also we need to work on that on the next releases.
Yeah, not only the amount of operations, it's a bit tricky that I think it might be error prone, because sometimes you just miss a space somewhere, or you add a wrong space, and then when you are working with this generation of IDs, whatever, everything is broken, and debugging this might be a huge nightmare for a developer. At least it's my opinion, so it's very good that you have some SDK for that, because I'm pretty sure it will facilitate quite a lot the life.
A complete headache. When you develop it, maybe you have problems with the certificate itself. It contains something that is not allowed. I understood perfectly.
So in the meantime, till this SDK is released, you have example applications in the GitLab for both client and providers. So it's easy to take this code in Python and adapt it to publish the API that you want.
You can see. At the repository, you can get those examples. Okay. It contains a cell, to send the request, each request, and you can see the code is in Python. You can explore it. Meanwhile, yes, Apostolis.
Have you guys installed CAPIF, graphical server that is available essentially publicly that we can use to experiment with?
For the moment,
So we have one public CAPIF in the 6G Sandbox environment. So in the 6G Sandbox project, we have deployed CAPIF for the partners and the open callers to integrate with OpenCAPIF. In Etsy, we have plans to publish a public instance as well, but it's still work in progress. In Sandbox, you need to request to us. So if you contact Matthew, he will provide you the username and password. In Etsy, this is what we are now working on to integrate somehow the authentication, etc., with Etsy systems.
I have another question, if I may.
Sorry.
No, another question, if I may, because I'm thinking, well, now honestly, I'm thinking on how is the NBI of TerraFlow in this case. That is something that it's close to me. And, well, what I see is that I have, for instance, for specific connectors, I mean, instead of having an endpoint, a concrete endpoint maybe, what I would like to expose is an entire module. That means just expose the prefix of the URL and then the rest of the URL to be composed by the application dynamically. Is this something that is doable with OpenCapif, that you compose the URL dynamically and you just try to discover? I don't know if I'm explaining myself. What I mean.
But you're talking about the service to be published?
Yeah, I mean, in this, let's go for an example. In this example that you are showing to us today, you are exposing the /hello. Okay, imagine that I have something like / I don't know, work / and then I have the office name / and maybe some resource inside the office, and I want to expose only I mean, the first part of the URL, because the rest is something that might change due to different things. Can I expose just prefixes of URLs in OpenCapif also? Will it be a limitation?
Good question. This field, the endpoint is a string. The way you fill the information, maybe we can use some, there are some regular expressions and these kind of things to allow that, but the implementation of the Invoker is the one that should care about that, because it gets the URL, and if the definition is under URL, you will have, for example, office and day of week, okay? You can set up with some variables, and then the invoker that reads that can change that variables. Okay.
Okay.
This
so you
is
like
not problem.
adding placeholders in the URL,
Yes.
or something like.
For example, like here in Postman, you have the variables with that kind of naming. We can follow that. Okay, but it's more up to the invoker and provider how to share that information. Capif Core just share the URL you publish.
Okay, so it's just a string that you can use however you want, and then when you raise the last request, I mean the actual call, if you decide to complement the URL with other things,
there are some conventions sharing the URLs. I don't remember, it's using brackets, simple brackets, and there in the specification, for example, here for the location and this kind of things, you specify on brackets for example, office, and you know when you receive it in the Invoker, you know if there are some brackets, you need to fill the information. Okay?
I'm asking because in some, I don't know, for instance, open APIs, just to mention something, sometimes some specifications or some APIs are huge and have hundreds or even thousands of URLs, just because they have additional levels of detail, and if you have to expose each of them one by one, it might be huge. So just if you can expose prefixes, it's fine. I understand from what you explained that in principle, yes, should not be a problem.
And for example, as Apostoli said, in the description, maybe you can refer to some information that shows you, okay, this is the root of the endpoint, and after that, you can configure that. Okay? Maybe it's outside of the scope of the OpenCapif, in fact. It only shares the information, and you need to establish how to share.
Yeah, sorry, if I may, actually, this was a question that I made to a colleague with a poster yesterday, and he recommended me an open source tool called KrakenD. So he told me KrakenD.
KrakenD.
Yeah, it's like an API gateway open source tool. And he was exposing and changing so you could modify your huge API dynamically, and it provides method to do it easily.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
It's a good question because I didn't think about that until this. Very good. Any more questions? Yeah?
Yes, hello. In this example, in this hands-on, the Hello API was the Capif provider, right?
The Hello API is the API published by a provider.
Is the publisher and
Published by provider, but it can be different entities. We can have a provider that publish an API, and the API published can be in another place. Okay. For example, it's just like a controller. Okay. You have. Okay, my provider is here in this in the port, for example, 8000. But my API is another place, is in another machine in another port. No problem. The provider just say where is the API he's managing.
And we cannot simply make, for example, a Flask API server. We need to modify it, following up the previous questions. We need to modify it to play with Capif. So, in your example, the Hello API, there is more than that. There is more configuration or more steps needed to be attached with Capif.
And David will answer you. It's behind you.
Yes, so if you have a REST API and you want to make it Capif compliant, let's say, you need to add some logic to it. And this is listed in the 3GPP API repository as AEF.
Security, yeah.
Security or something like that. Basically, you need to implement a couple of operations. In case you are using auth, for instance, you need the API request to get the token, analyze the token, check the scope, the Invoker ID, etc., and then decide if the API request progress or not. Okay. In case you want to support other security methods like the pre-share key or the one-basing certificates, you need to add the logic to validate the certificates from the API invokers that are consuming the API.
Thank you. And in this hands-on, the part with the Node.js, there was a script.js. Is this related to that or not?
No, the Node, the JavaScript, is only related with the Postman. It's in charge of change the certificates according to each request. As Pelayo showed us, we have some pre-scripts that loads the certificate that operation needs. And the other one is the Python code is the hello world API. Okay. Inside you can see how it read the token and decode it, but not use in this example. Okay.
In a real scenario, these certificates that we installed with the Node.js script,
No.
how we would do it in real life?
If you want to use Postman or
No. If I am an API invoker, if I am a client.
okay. In this case, if, for example, if you create an invoker, you need to create your own certificate, the public and private key, make the onboard, share the public key and you get the certificate, sign it, and you must use in the next request. Okay? In Invoker is easy, the provider maybe is more complex because it has 3 different roles and you make care about which one you must use. But it's up to the developer in that case.
Thank you.
We hope with the new SDK, we simplify that. Okay.
I have another question. Sorry.
Okay. So what about unpublishing APIs? As far as I know, in the API definition, you can set up a expiration time. So the API won't be available after that expiration time, right? Mm-hmm. But then, apart from that, who can unpublish an API? Just the provider that publishes it, or anybody, or how does that work?
The provider itself can remove it. And in this implementation, okay, the release 1, also operator. The administrator that we create can remove that. Okay. And also, if you remove the user from the register, it removes all the components related. The APIs and anything.
Okay. And what will be the case if I authorize against the system and against the CCF and onboard as provider, publish an API, and then, let's say, close my program? So I lose my ID as a provider, as AEF. If I authenticate again and onboard again as a provider, I get a different ID. So I'm a different provider at the end of the day. Yeah. So how could I just lost the capability to unpublish those APIs, right? I could need to request the administrator to solve that situation.
Yes. The problem there is it happens if, for example, using the SSH in your machine. If you lose your certificate, you need to create a new one and register that. This is a problem, but
it's not part of the use case of the.
Okay. In this case, the operator of the system that we create can manage that. Maybe remove your previously registered one, and you can start again. Or okay, we can do it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have now 2 additional questions. Sorry. First question: I saw that all the APIs that, or the endpoints that you are exposing are based on HTTP. Are there extensions for other protocols or other abstractions, like, let's say, gRPC? I know it works on top of HTTP2, but maybe the abstraction of the methods that are used or are provided by a gRPC server can somehow or with some trick be exposed through OpenCapif? Or maybe Kafka, for instance, the topics and these kind of things, or there is no plan or / extension for that?
No, I think no. We only support the HTTP request, the REST API.
REST API,
yeah.
Okay.
This is the definition of the 3GPP, in fact.
Yeah, I understand. It just was, by chance, there was possibility for other brand of protocols.
Maybe, but not now.
Okay. Okay. And the second question, the framework looks nice, but I would like to know if there is some way, or maybe it would be nice if OpenCapif can provide some way for automatically checking if the endpoints are maybe still alive. I don't know if there is some thing, some way to automate this thing.
A Herbit or something
Like that, because maybe if there is some endpoint that is not responding for a number of tries, maybe you check it as disabled or not available or something, and then you can prevent maybe a flood of requests that will go to nowhere. I don't know if there is some extension considered for that.
The API status is not for that, no?
No, the API status is modified or specified by the provider, and well, Capif only check this attribute.
We don't have yet any Herbit for that.
Some form of monitoring maybe will be nice to have at some point.
Yes, but
just I raised it just as an idea. I mean, no.
It's a good idea, but the thing here is it acts as a directory of
yes.
APIs. Then the provider should be care about which one are published each time.
Yeah.
Maybe we can think on that. Okay.
Yeah. I'm thinking now comparing it with, for instance, the Herbit checks of Kubernetes that you can specify some URLs, for instance, for proving if your service is still up, or maybe if it was down, Kubernetes can try to restart it automatically, these kind of things. Mm-hmm. Here maybe you can not restart or do things because your role is just exposing endpoints between mm-hmm. systems, in my understanding. But keeping track of which ones replied yes, I'm still alive, or which ones are temporarily not available, maybe, would be a nice feature in my opinion. Just this.
We can take a look anyway to the definition. Maybe in the specification there are something about that, but I don't remember now. In fact, no, but it's a good point anyway.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any question? Apostolis.
Last one from my side. Have you ever basically tried to publish an API that is exposed, let's say, by Amazon, by Google, by somebody else? In theory, it should be possible, right? So you can basically publish an API, and you give the endpoint of Amazon or Google. And then you get also the access token in order to have access to this API.
It can be possible.
In theory, it could be possible, right?
It could be possible, yes. But the token that we can give you, it doesn't work.
No, the publisher will basically send you essentially the token. So for the invoker to get the token, it needs to request essentially the token, right? It needs to make this basically token.
The security context.
Request, yes.
And get the token. And
so who provides the token? It's
the Capif core function.
Capif core function.
It's not the provider.
Yeah, it's not the provider.
The Capif core function, so it's not the publisher.
No.
So then the Capif core function cannot know the access token to access Amazon or Google, but the publisher could know that.
In theory, you can integrate your Capif core function with an external OAuth provider to get those tokens, but this is something that you need to do by yourself. It's not part of the standard. You know what I mean?
Yes, I know it.
Okay. Any more questions? Yes, we are just in time. Very good. Thank you very much to all of you. And remember to join it's not there. The community through Slack, and please ask anything you need.